Speaking of cowardice, I put a tweet out on X and I said, if you were sat opposite Alex Phillips, what one question would you ask? And somebody put in the comments, I would ask her why it's taken her so long to look into the persecution of Tommy Robinson. I then commented underneath saying, what I'll actually ask is, how come you're the first mainstream journalist to highlight the persecution of Tommy Robinson? So if we're going to talk about bravery, what made you go there, knowing that you could get massive backlash or even cancelled?
Because so far it hasn't happened, and because, like I said, I've suddenly realised that we are all stakeholders in this. You can't expect someone else to do something if you're not going to do it yourself. So maybe that's it. Also, frankly, I'm, as much as all the people I'm talking about, the middle classes who have to tug their forelock to diversity and to get to where they are, I've been on that travelator. After university, I went and lived around the world working as a journalist in loads of different countries, mainly across the Commonwealth. Came home, went to journalism school and worked for ITV and then the BBC. So then I'm on the travelator, right? And what happened was, I remember once at a meeting at the BBC, it was when, it's a year after the Eastern European countries had given freedom of movement to the UK, and they wanted to do a sort of talk about, a year later, how have things changed? Sitting in this editorial meeting, they're like, I know this amazing text of, my wonderful hairdresser. We can go and look at this, Polish restaurant and the meals are really delicious and And I was like, what about the school where the teacher's struggling to teach kids because there's 7 different languages? Everyone just sort of looked at me like I was speaking, I was basically going, fucking hate the Poles, they're evil, send them all home. Why would anyone? I fucking love the Poles. Bring them back. I'm missing them, can I just say? And I remember sitting in that editorial meeting thinking, I can't live like this. I can't be in an organisation that you can't talk about stuff and you're the BBC. And so I left to go and work for Nigel Farage. I was on their VIP training scheme. I was one of 10 people picked from around the country to be fast-tracked through the BBC as a star of the future. One of 10 in the whole country. And I fucking left that to go and work for Nigel Farage before anyone even knew who he was. So I stood up and made my decision a long fucking time ago, that I was prepared to sacrifice to do what I believe in. Now, when it comes to the Tommy thing, there is still something going on politically because of things baked into society that it's still incredibly difficult to address. It's still very difficult to... what's at stake for a lot of people is a lot. What's interesting is with Tommy, he's lost it all already. He couldn't suddenly come out of prison and go, do you know what? I'm done with being Tommy Robinson. I'm going to go back to being Stephen Yaxley Lennon. I'm going to go get a job as... It's done now, isn't it? It's gone. He's made his bed and he's got to lie in it. He doesn't have a choice anymore, and he's fighting. He's fighting and saying, I got nothing to lose. A lot of people like this still have a lot to lose, and it's a big decision. If you're prepared to jeopardize it or risk it, particularly when it comes to economics and finance, right? If you're a journalist and you got children or whatever, or journalists aren't paid a lot. When people see someone on Telebox, they assume they're sort of rolling around in a Merc. No, they're not. Journalists are paid shit unless you're Gary Lineker. So if that's your main source of income and you're worried that you're going to lose it, and everyone's replaceable, especially if you're on telly or radio, everybody wants that job. Could be replaced in a second. Then it's very difficult thinking I'm going to risk this. It's tenuous anyway, and I'm prepared to just, put some TNT underneath it. But I've got past form with doing this anyway in life, right? Like I said, left BBC to go to, I've taken those risks and it's always worked out for me. But also I'm a believer in God. I'm a big believer in God. And for those people who are listening who aren't religious, this stuff always sounds a bit balmy to somebody who isn't a believer. But for those people who are listening who are believers, they will understand what I say when I say I feel his hand on my shoulder. And that gives one courage. So, circumstantially, hadn't even really sort of spoken about it because he's not mentioned in newsrooms. He's persona non grata in newsrooms. So his name hasn't really come up a lot in my life anyway. During the riots, I went to do an interview with Panorama and his name came up and they said, what do you think about Tommy Robinson? I knew they were trying to ask some sort of leading question. And I said, I don't know him. I've not met him. Still to this day, I have not met him. So I don't know. But he's a phenomenon and shouldn't, as a journalist, you be asking why Tommy Robinson instead? Now, since that, Tommy got in touch with me on Twitter and said something about, I liked what you posted or something. I can remember his name popping up and thinking,
that's him.
Robinson's messaged me. Yeah, I just replied. Turns out he loves replying, doesn't he? He's like, well, probably can't so much right now. But he's communicates, quick fire. And so then I said to him, well, let's do an interview because I thought, this is ridiculous. I watched his Oxford Union presentation and do you know what I felt when I saw him? I was so proud of him.
Incredible, wasn't it?
Oh, I was so proud of him in that moment. This working class man.
And he was young back then.
Young, little podgy face. This working class man standing up in front of the toughest audience. Most top academics would be scared going into that lion's pit. And I felt a real sense of pride in him. And then after interviewing him and hearing about his story, that was an education for me as well. And we spoke for way over 2 hours. The interview on thatalexwoman.com is an hour long. Because you need to cut things down to be able to be hosted on the site. But also he talked a lot about the documentary. And unfortunately, it's law's the law. Mm-hmm. But yeah, having spoken to him, I then went back. He said to me, go and look at the old protests down in Luton. Yeah, there was a load of skinheads and thug-looking people, if you will. You're a thug-looking person, working class.
I'll take all in boxes.
Loads of people, carrying placards. There's even one video of a load of people in Bally's burning a flag. They're burning the swastika. They're burning the Nazi flag. And when I went back and Tommy said, look at the sort of things we were saying, they had signs saying no to racism. I'm like, I'm 40 and I hadn't done my research before this point. And I went and I was like, so then you kind of go on a hunt. I'm going to find the thing he said and done. I'm going to weed it. Why? I'm going to find it. And I haven't been able to, other than, simple fact, he comes from a dog-eat-dog world. Neighbourhood he was brought up in. A dog-eat-dog world where it's kind of survival of the fittest. Yeah, he used to be a hooligan. He owns up to that stuff. And like I said to you at the start of this interview, I've lived in that world as well. I've worked in the nightclubs and the pubs of Gloucester. That's Britain. They're the people who, if there was a war tomorrow, they're fighting for it. They're the people who are the bastions of our heritage, our humour, our culture, the bricks and mortar. It's them. They're the ones who make a pub a lively and exciting place, not a fucking gastro pub with gin and tonic for 25 quid with half the garden in a flower vase. No, I don't want that. I don't want that. I want the bawdy humour. I want the sort of un-PC jokes. I want the sort of, we'll have our fights, we'll resolve them. Come into my house, borrow anything you like. I'll do that for you. I'll mow your lawn. My kid will go up that ladder for you. Community. And that's exactly what the middle class don't have. They don't even know what it is. They've got zero fucking community. So I know when the shit hits the fan, I know what the backbone of this country is. Not just the backbone, but the beating heart.
So after actually interviewing Tommy,
yeah,
did you get any backlash for interviewing him?
No.
Did Nigel Farage not say anything to you about it?
He's not said anything to me.
Because he does distance himself from Tommy.
Yeah, well, we haven't actually spoken about it. I've spoken to Nigel since, but it didn't come up in our conversation. He'll be aware of it.
Yeah. Why do you think Nigel Farage does distance himself from Tommy? Because they've got the same fan base.
Look, I don't want to be piggy in the middle in this one. And it's not fair for me to sort of say one thing or another or assume something or the other. I adore Nigel. He's one of my best friends in the world. I was his right-hand woman for a long time. What I do know, what I can tell you is he's very astute politically. And he knows that Reform have got a real chance now. 5 seats in Parliament, looking at the current polling, and we're only 3 months into this new Labour government. It's not really working out, is it? I don't think the sort of huge boost of Badenoch's having the right sort of impact. It seems to me, and we're still a long way away from the next election, but if Reform can target, this is to win seats in our parliament under our system, it's not good enough to just go, we're going to say what we believe and that's it. You've got to strategise tactically. That involves both targeting certain constituencies, looking where you got your second places, putting funding resources, building up local branches, building up, a head of steam and a sort of a centrifugal force in certain areas. There's those mechanics. The other mechanics are to get a majority, right? You look at the seats where you've got the most likely demographic. For Reform, it's largely white working class seats where they're going to probably perform super well. For obvious reasons, like you said, same fan base. But also to get yourself over the line, in a lot of these instances, you need to build blocks of voters. So you need to be able to get those people who are your base. You also need to drag in some of the people who aren't naturally your base. The sort of grey collar sector, the professional classes, now these people who aren't necessarily your base might not have had the scales fall away from their eyes yet, like I've been talking about. And again, for a lot of people, however much we think everything is now online, a lot of people are still heavily influenced by legacy media. So you know what would happen. I'm not saying this is Nigel's thinking, but logically speaking, if Nigel turned around and said, Tommy Robinson, even if he just said something really neutral. In fact, if he just said Tommy Robinson without even finishing the sentence, if he just went Tommy Robinson, that's all that they're going to talk about every time he's interviewed. But you said the other day, Tommy Robinson, you said, so he can talk as much as he likes about reforming the NHS or improving education or tackling the cost of living crisis or geopolitics or how much money we should be. It doesn't fucking matter. It's gone. It's done. Because all they'll say is, but you said Tommy Robinson. So all of a sudden, this vote that he's got stays, might grow a bit. The other votes he needs to get over the line to win seats to actually affect political change is minimised. Now, that's just election strategy, of which I've done a lot myself, not just in the UK, but other countries. So choices are made politically. And those choices are political, not necessarily personal, in the same way that, we've been speaking already about that people having a lot at stake just in the ordinary world of saying what they think. Even if you're just someone who runs a bakery and it's your own family business, you're worried about what you can say and do. When you get into the world of politics at the highest level, the stakes are even fucking higher because everyone's waiting to trip you up, especially if you're Nigel Farage. They're all waiting to find whatever they can to try and prevent you being successful. So he has to figure out. It's a narrow path, but he's got to figure out how to walk it. That will change. That will change. Things do dramatically change. When he first entered into politics and just spoke about leaving the EU, leaving a trading bloc, racist, lunatic, fruitcake. That's all he said. He just wanted to leave the EU. Perfectly normal. We've actually left it now. Then when he started saying immigration levels are too high, racist, monster. Well, now it's a conversation that even the Labour Party are prepared to say, well, we've got to bring down the levels of immigration. So he's the one who actually shifts the narrative in this country, moves the debate along quite often. And he doesn't shy away from doing it. And he's also one of the best readers of the political tea leaves. So let him figure that out.
People will be expecting me to ask the question. I understand why Nigel Farage won't mention Tommy politically. That does make political sense, and I can see why he would do that. Not mentioning Tommy is obviously a different ball game to actually denouncing him, and people want to know, did Richard Tice overstep the mark recently where he completely denounced Tommy and his followers by referring to them as that lot, and he was dismissive?
I know Richard Tice really dearly as a huge intrinsic part of reform. And at some point I probably will be again. But I know these people personally, and I'm not advising them strategically. And I don't want to say anything that's going to upset anybody. I think that, just from the evidence of what the reaction's been to how Richard phrased himself is, you even sort of asked it in the opening of the question, people then said to him. So that you've answered your own question, really, haven't you? It didn't have the optimal response.
Oh, God, no. I wonder if he even meant that.
No, I don't think he did. And I think that Nigel is far more adept because he's far more practiced. He's been doing this for ages, and Nigel's had the shit thrown at him for ages. For ages. He's a professional shit dodger now. Most of the time, the shit hits him and actually just makes him stronger because it's their bullshit, not his. Richard is contextually not as experienced as Nigel. And also because he's polite and nice and, articulate and middle class and charming. They've never roughhoused him as much as they have done Nigel. So he's just, he's perhaps not as savvy in that regard. Very, very bright man. Very bright man and a good man. I mean, I just want to say this about Richard. If anyone out there's gone, I don't like Richard Tice anymore. He's one of the most incredible, humble people I've ever met. When the Brexit Party finished, he put it on ice. The name had already been changed to Reform, but he put time and energy and money into that to keep it alive and ticking over. Just a shell of a thing. But he kept it alive. And he always wanted Nigel to come back. It's what he wanted. Often I was used as an interlocutor. Have you spoken to Nigel? Do you know where he's at? Do you know if he's thinking of coming back? And it was a given that when Nigel comes back, it's his party. And not just his party in terms of he becomes leader, but Nigel is a leader in every sense of the word. He really manages. He becomes the sort of the king. And Richard wanted that. That man put energy and time and money into keeping that party alive, knowing that the one who's going to take home the accolades, the one who's going to have the worship, the one who's going to be in the history books will be Nigel. Show me a man able to do that. Very few people have that sort of humility, generosity and pragmatism. That very few people have that, and Richard has it in abundance.
Final couple of things. What does the future hold for you? And also, if you were Prime Minister, how would you change the country? How would you like the UK to become?
No one knows what the future holds.
What do you want it to hold? What are you striving for?
I'd like to get married and have children, actually, if I'm honest.
Good on you.
Time's ticking on. And I'm afraid that's kind of out of my hands because you need a willing partner on the other side who's on board with that. I'm always going to, in my life, be committed to engaging with what happens with this country. I have done, my whole career's been about that. Like I said, I walked out of the BBC before I'd even done 6 months there to go and work for UKIP when they were still an unknown. So I've known that is my raison d'etre for a long time. How that manifests, whether it's broadcast, whether it's politics, I don't know. I have a feeling, given the way that broadcasting is going, it's going to be politics. And so, yeah, that's where I'd like it to go in that direction, rather than just talk about it like I'm doing right now, do it. So let's see what fate has in store, what he has in store for me, because it's, will be his agenda really that I fulfill. If I was Prime Minister, I just think that what's needed is guts and conviction. I think for too long there's been a reticence to doing what's necessary. And actually a sort of brutal sense of honesty and leadership. Because politicians now, because they're all from the finishing school of the sort of tugging the forelock, they're all from the professional classes, really. You don't really have people who have lived an unsheltered life and therefore have an unhindered vision. So I would hope that if I end up at any point in any ways of the workings of the state, that I would just be a champion for conviction and actually having a vision rather than just day by day managing a situation, hoping that somehow it's all going to work out, but treading the fine line because you don't want to upset the apple cart or risk your own seat or, in this game, you've got to be risk averse really, or there's no point playing.
And what does the ideal Britain look like for you?
It looks like a country that is able to unite about things because people are setting these in stone. You know, since King Charles came to the throne, we haven't had trestle tables out for a thing for a while. I kind of want that. That's what we do. You know, I don't know, it's probably not due a jubilee or something, but can you come up with some fucking reason why we can all get out trestle tables and make soggy sandwiches again? Because I like that stuff. People might think it's silly and unimportant, but actually it's not. These little markers are quite important. Throw an extra bank holiday into the mix. Stop talking down the country. DEI gone. This stuff is toxic. It's harmful. That's banned. I don't want any of that. Don't want any of this sort of corrupt, horrible, divisive, narrative about seeing everything through the prism of race. That's banned. That's gone. Woke, gone. It's evil. It's failed. It's made us divided as society.
Woke feeds racism, I think.
Yeah, it does. And do you know what? If you took that shit out, you'd actually find that a lot of people from a lot of cultures rubbed along a lot better. And when people came here, they'd want to integrate because they had something to buy into. You can't say people are coming to Britain, not integrating, not buying into the concept of Britain, when the concept of Britain is being kicked in the bollocks and thrown to the dogs. Like, what do you want people to be buying into then? So that's got to come back. And I'm a big believer in positivity, building positively for the future, not going, oh, this is terrible, oh, no. I'm an optimistic person. So I want to see, we need to boost the economy enormously. We need to go down the sort of Javier Milei route of taking the chainsaw to all of the crap and the sort of, dead weeds that tangle up business and industry in this country. It's got to go. And then just a sense of optimism and not be afraid to bring back old-fashioned values and teachings. Schools should have school assemblies. School assemblies should be built upon Christianity. I'm not saying everyone's got to go to church and believe, but I'm afraid this is a Christian country, and that is why we thrived. That is why we thrived throughout history. One religion has brought the progress. One. Vaccines, internet, computers, electricity, you bloody name it, ending slavery, whatever you want to look at. One religion largely has been the big engine behind so much human and societal progress. And let's not forget that, and let's not be ashamed of that, and let's make that at the basis once more of how we think about ourselves and how we want to build our country going forward. I think that is, like I said, his hand's on my shoulder, and I feel like I, in many respects, am trying to do his bidding, maybe not brilliantly. But that's always going to be a motivating factor for me.
And as an atheist, I completely agree with everything you've just said. Bring back Christian values, restore them in the UK for goodness sake. And before we wrap this up, anything you want to say?
Be part of the change you want to see. That is actually being part of, say, the teachings of, I hate to bring it back to Christianity, but I'm going to. I don't hate to, I like it, but people might not. I'm going to bring it back to that, which is the messages of Christianity are tolerance, kindness, thinking and acting in a way that embraces other people, whoever they are. That's important. It's also a message of conviction and courage, because a man knew he was going to be nailed to a cross, and he stood up for values anyway. So my message is to anybody listening, if you want change, you've got to be part of it. And that is in everything you do in life. But do it with the decency of a Brit.
And that's that. Well, Alex, it's been a joy, and thank you for your honesty and your words of reassurance to the British public.
Oh, I loved it.
Thank you.
Thanks, Liam.